If someone were to ask you to take a look at prominent historical figures from an objective point of view, what do you think are some of the traits you might point out? Let's take a look at Christopher Columbus, for example. Most people would associate him with being a navigator or an explorer, maybe even a colonizer. If we look at someone like Martin Luther King, then he's associated with being an activist or a civil rights leader. Let's go a little bigger. If we were to take a look at someone like Alexander the Great, then most people would peg him to be a conqueror or even a hero. Would we associate him with being homosexual, though? Most people wouldn't, and neither would most historians. However, most historians are aware of the fact that Alexander the Great, upon hearing of the death of his dear friend Bucephalus, hosted a memorial and even named a city after him in his honor. Historians would say that they were close friends, but recent evidence is leading us to believe that this is inherently incorrect, and in fact they may have been closer. Today I'm going to be talking about why the inherent erasure of both racial and queer identities from history is harmful, and how it leads to a larger system of hatred and ignorance in the world. I'm going to be discussing the problems, the causes, and the solution that I think would be fit to a better world, a better society. So without further ado, let's go into the problems. Erasure in any sense is inherently harmful, but erasure of queer identities is even more so detrimental. When people think of hatred, they often think of external hatred, which presents itself in forms of hate crimes or even genocide, or minor issues such as prejudice and discrimination. But there is an internal hatred that comes from the erasure of these identities from history. Internal hatred that manifests as suicide rates, self-esteem issues, concepts such as colorism, internalized homophobia, or internalized misogyny. Memorize these two numbers, 34.8 and 30.4. You may not know their significance, but I'm here to tell you that these are the suicide rates side by side of Native American men to white American men. If we were to look at the queer community, then we would know that there is a twice as likely chance for bisexual women and lesbian women to commit suicide compared to straight women, and a 4 times as likely chance for bisexual men and gay men to commit suicide compared to straight men. As you can see, this hatred is a disease, and it's plaguing the community in ways that we still may not understand. These statistics come from the National Institute of Mental Health and the Psychiatric Times. So now that we've discussed the problems, let's go into the causes. The causes of the erasure of this history can best be jotted down into 2 different categories. There is challenging norms and there is addressing trauma. When I talk about challenging norms, I'm talking about using words such as Eurocentrism and heteronormativity. Essentially, what I mean to say is that by speaking and teaching of these different identities and cultures, we would be challenging the norms that we have come to accept and know as a society, norms that dictate how we dress, how we talk, how we view gender and relationships. To speak of otherwise could lead to dissonance, which could lead to even greater problems, possibly even greater hatred. However, when I speak of addressing traumas, I speak of what Cynthia Greenlee quoted as a racist revisionism. By accepting the erasure of these racial and queer identities from our history, we are ignoring the long-lasting effects their trauma has led to in the society. That means not addressing issues properly such as poverty, or mental illness, or drug usage. We are essentially stamping it into the ground. And of course, how are we ever going to fix these issues if we don't know the true cause, the true root? There is a solution, however, and that solution is integration. Queer and racial history should be taught alongside normal history, as if it is normal. Minorities in every aspect should be able to see themselves in the textbooks. In doing so, teaching it from an objective glance, we are allowing young minds to view clashing viewpoints and clashing cultures from a very neutral tone, which will ultimately lower chances of massive hate crimes or even general prejudices that they may already have. We're also removing stigmas. We're not teaching it to be exotic or weird or something inherently abnormal. We're teaching it from a neutral standpoint, and in doing so, we are contributing to a better world. Children of minorities and minorities in general should be able to see themselves in the textbooks. They should be able to view themselves as members of, they should be able to view themselves as people such as Martin Luther King. They should be able to be poets, writers. They should see themselves as conquerors, like Alexander the Great. Racial identity and queer identity is important. Erasing it is harmful. It leads to hatred. It leads to suicide. It leads to violence. But if we can treat it as if it were any other normal thing, we're allowing for children to be invited to a better tomorrow, a better world. And there's nothing more important than that. Thank you.